Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 118. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, and commented. All your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. Also want to thank our sponsors. Samson Equipment provides first-class weight rooms and has earned an exceptional reputation of providing the finest quality, design, and customer service. Being a direct manufacturer, the team at Samson brings full customization capabilities and not only branding, but in custom equipment needed to execute your next project. Samson provides professional weight room solutions for all your strength and conditioning needs. See the Samson standard for yourself and learn more at samsonequipment.com. Also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus is trusted by the top strength sport athletes and lifters in the world. Cerberus's wide range of products are made by athletes for athletes, truly living up to its moniker, made by the strong for the strong. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to use promo code STRENGTH_game at checkout to receive 10% off your next order at CerberusStrength.com. And I also want to thank our sponsor, Sport Kilt. Sport Kilt offers a wide range of universal and clan tartans, as well as custom sport kilts and an excellent selection of accessories and apparel to complement the kilt wear. For over 25 years, Sport Kilt has been striving to perfect their version of the Scottish classic to create the ultimate garment of fashion and function. Check out the full line of kilts and join the kilt life at sportkilt.com, and be sure to use promo code TSG to save on your next order. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Sam Jeffries. Sam is the Director of Strength Conditioning at the University of Detroit Mercy. Jeffries came to Detroit Mercy from Elizabeth City State University, where he was the Assistant Athletic Director of Sports Performance, where he developed the university's first sports performance program, integrating the athletic training, strength conditioning, and sports nutrition programs for the varsity teams. Prior to that, he was the Director of Athletic Performance at Godspeed Elite Sports Academy in Hoover, Alabama from 2020 to 2022, where he worked with the teams and individuals at the middle, high school, and collegiate level, including professional football players. He began his career as a graduate assistant coach at Salisbury University before taking over as Director of Sports Performance at Perfect Performance in Tysons Corner, Virginia in 2017, before leading the strength conditioning department at Mary Baldwin University from 2018 to 2020. Jeffries also garnered experience as an intern strength coach at James Madison University, Temple University, and Georgetown University. Jeffries played football at Greensboro College, earning academic all-conference honors twice. As a coach, he continues to train, mainly utilizing a lot of Olympic lifting, running, and basketball, as well as incorporating a lot more yoga and movement into his training recently. I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Sam Jeffries. What's going on, everybody? Today, of course, we've got another Salisbury and Georgetown family tree kind of alumni on. We've got Coach Sam Jeffries. What's going on, man?
Nothing much, man. How are you? It was funny. I was going back looking through all the old episodes that you had and how many guys that I know from that Salisbury connection, the Georgetown connection, all that. It's pretty crazy, that kind of, coaching tree, how big it is now. It's awesome.
Yeah, that both of those two, I don't know. I definitely started the Salisbury connection with Georgetown, but to see it kind of flourish after and see all the people that have kind of done both and are now kind of progressing outside of it and reaching out of it. It's pretty cool. And had to get you on, like, more so than just that, but just keep the connection going and see what you've been up to. So, hey man, let's hop right into it. I appreciate you coming on today. So with all that said, like, how did you really get started training, playing sports and everything, like as you were growing up, leading into what now you're doing for yourself training wise?
Yeah, so I always played sports growing up, football, basketball, baseball. I went to a boarding school for high school actually, and you were kind of required to do something in the, afternoons or whatever. So I played football, basketball, and baseball. So it was pretty rare now to have a three-sport high school athlete with all the specialization and everything, but I loved it. I loved, being able to continue my career and all that and keep playing and do all that. But at the same time, looking back on it now, the strength conditioning side was definitely, lacking throughout my high school career. We had an athletic trainer who did some strength training stuff with us. And that's actually what I thought athletic training was he was doing the medical stuff, but we were also lifting and all that. So, when I went to college for athletic training, I was confused when they were, almost anti weight room. And I was always kind of butting heads with them on those type of things. But played football in college and pursued that. And we didn't have a strength and conditioning coach there either. We had a football coach kind of doing it. So all the way up through my college career, we were kind of bro sciencing it and just lifting heavy and trying to do the best we could when it came to that. No mobility, no technical work or anything like that. Just squat, bench, deadlift, pretty much, and playing football and had a bunch of injuries in college, which you could probably figure out by how we were training, just the nature of college football, and actually decided to double major in exercise science when I was down there because I gravitated more towards the weight room and all that, and I did my first internship with this guy William Bradley down there in Greensboro, North Carolina, and he's a big speed guy. He was actually the smallest Division I college football player when he played. So he's a big speed guy, and he was, my first exposure to speed technique. And people were coming to him trying to, run faster 40s at camps. And he was teaching people how to train through a full range of motion. And he was big on mobility and those type of things, which was all new to me. But he kind of saw my background and my athletic training degree, which was very valuable. Like, I don't regret doing that at all. It still helps me, and kind of partnered with him, and he got me started in the field. And then, you know, kind of realized that, hey, I want to do this at a high level. He kind of suggested I need to go work in the college setting. And that's when I decided to go to Salisbury, and they had that academic program, got in there with Matt Nine, and, he kind of, put me in the right direction toward all those things. And honestly, I tell people all the time, people ask me, where'd you learn the most? Where did you grow the most as a coach? And I'd say Salisbury, going into that situation, having Matt and having, Nick Alloy, Chris Messina, and Mike Inman, three guys with very different philosophies, very different ways of doing things. And I got to jump in there and learn, from those three guys, totally different ways to do things. It was like, there's really no better place to learn and become a well-rounded coach, coming with the background I had with, the private side and the speed work and all that, and then mixing in everything that they do, and, actually learning how to Olympic lift properly for the first time and those kind of things. So it was really, huge for me to have that experience. And then, after that, I've been all over the place from the private side to, small colleges, and with the goal kind of always, working my way up to be a head coach at the Division I level, and was able to achieve that here, starting here last year. And, I'm grateful for all the, opportunities that I had building up to this to make me really ready for this position. Because, maybe when I was 26, I thought I was ready for it, but, now that, I'm 32, and it's like, it was the right time for me to come and do this. And, my training throughout the years has kind of, been centered on trying to stay semi-athletic. And when you work in the private setting, and what I try to tell people is, there's a sales aspect to it. You have to look the part. And when you have guys that are pursuing the NFL, they're playing in the NFL, they're, playing sports at a high level, you need to be able to demonstrate and show them how to do things. And they're coming to you for speed work. And, you need to be able to go out there and show them that. And if you want to, be successful in that realm, and, I've had two, pretty good stints in the private setting, it's very much driven by that. Like, what's your ability to be an example, to show people? Do parents want their, high level high school son to come train with you, by the way that you look, by the way that you're able to do things? So, I've always been kind of tapped into that. Plus, you know, trying to do everything that I'm trying to teach, which gives me, some ground to stand on when it comes to coaching.
Yeah, that's a good point too, like that private setting, because I mean, you still deal with it in college, like at the university level, like you're still selling yourself, you're selling your program, but the big difference is like an athlete really isn't necessarily going to leave a program if like they don't really aren't invested in the strength coach because they're there to play the sport. Like you're kind of a piece of it, but when you're in the private setting, you really do have to sell it because someone's paying you, and if they don't
Yeah.
like the product, they don't like how you demo, they don't feel like you're doing a good job, they're going to jump shift because you're only doing a portion of their development versus university where you kind of just you get whatever strength coaches with the program at that time. So definitely a lot of skills that you picked up from the private setting you could take over. And yeah, like on that GA experience, like being surrounded by that, that was the best part. Like just having like the fellow people around that were completely different, and then being stuck with them in a small office, like, and just coaching all the time. You learn so many different things because everybody has different tendencies, coming from different backgrounds, have kind of different degrees if they weren't like undergraduate playing there. So you get to kind of sharpen the sword on in so many different avenues and like add more things to your toolbox. And like you said, all those guys you mentioned are still coaching nowadays too at like various different levels, different organizations and places. So it's definitely kind of a microcosm of good coaches that pop out of there and go on to be successful. So definitely cool. Kind of touching on what you were talking about. I know we'll get into what your current position is and like the experience and everything that you feel like you've gained over your time to get to a director role at a Division I school, but kind of touch on like what the steps were to get you there, because there's differences between the Division I, Division II, Division III, and you've been in the private setting, like you mentioned too. Like how were those experiences able to help kind of shaped you to take over, like at maybe even if it wasn't a Division I level, just help you get into a more leadership role by almost kind of starting smaller setting and building up.
Yeah, I think that I'm grateful that I had that smaller setting. I think maybe when I was, younger, or when you're first looking for jobs coming out of there, it's, you know, does Division III, do people pigeonhole me in Division III? Am I not getting Division I opportunities because I don't have Division I experience? And then when I've done internships at some places, and, you talk to other people as well, it's like we did more as GAs at the D3 level than GAs do at the Division I level. Like there's not schools where two GAs are running football. Like that doesn't happen at big schools. So getting thrown into the fire, and maybe we didn't do the best job ever, but we felt pretty good about it, and we learned through our mistakes, and we really got the experience and the exposure from a young age to learn and grow, and that really helped. And then from there, it's always just been kind of a grind and kind of accepting that, like, hey, it's going to be a road to get to where I want to at the Division I level, because I played Division III, I've coached Division III, I've worked at small private facilities and did all those things. But I think working on the private side really helped me be a better coach, because like I talked about earlier, it's about selling yourself. And you know it's such a huge part of it when you go into a room anywhere, is how you present yourself and those things that you think about, and not taking any of that for granted, and always wanting to make a good impression, not relying on the logo on your shirt, but relying on who you are as a coach, and being confident and knowing that you can bring it when it comes to being a coach. And that all those steps kind of prepared me for this opportunity. And being at smaller schools as well, taking over being a head strength coach at Division III school, was a great opportunity. I was able to make those kind of first time mistakes there, and not at a level where the pressure's higher and the stakes are higher, and things like that. And just able to kind of grow and become my own person as well, and still lean on other coaches in the area, and still do internships. Did an internship at JMU during the COVID year, and I'd been a head strength coach, and still wanting to go in there and learn and ask, like, what do I need to do to be better? What do I need to do this at a Division I level? And I think those steps and having people that were willing to help me with that saw that I had, the ability to do it, just needed, more experience and, different perspectives, I think, was huge.
Yeah, I mean, the humility to kind of go back and like realize like, hey, I haven't reached my goal. Like if I've set these lofty goals for myself, like I can't just think that collecting time in one place and just having the same experience over and over and over again is really going to set me up for success. Like I have to go out and seek more information. I need to go talk to people that are in the positions that I want to be in and see like, hey, like objectively look at my stuff, like look at what I'm doing, look at like this is where I want to be, like what are the things that I'm missing to kind of get me there. And it takes a lot more work on your part, I think, or anybody's part that's kind of coming from a position for whatever reason, Division III, Division II, NAIA schools, like whatever the stigma that's kind of around it. But I think you hit the nail on the head. And every time I have the opportunity to like bring interns on, bring GAs on, or help like bring on full-time staff, like I look at those things a lot more, like just as you mentioned too, because at that level, there's more time on the floor coaching, you're working with more teams, the chances are you're probably in charge of teams. Now, the things we know where you're kind of missing, and you could probably fill any of these in that I might be missing as well, is like sometimes you don't like work with the other staff members. You're not talking to the coaches as much because you're so pulled in so many different directions that your job is just like everything is weight room oriented. It's kind of a machine where you're pumping them in and you're doing classes. Like what
Yeah.
else do you think? Like now you think of like division, like when we were grad students versus kind of interning or being a grad assistant at a Division I level, like what are the other things that maybe a lower division level that's kind of like only in the weight room a lot is maybe missing that would help them obtain that like full-time position Division I?
Yeah, I think so. When I went to Temple, actually, so when I was done at Salisbury, I was at a tennis academy for a little bit, and it was good money, but I hated it. So I saved some money and was like, okay, I'm gonna kind of bet on myself, and I'm gonna do an internship at Temple. And Mike was working there at the time, and he was like, hey, just come intern. We'll work with you. We'll try to get you a job. So, I go there, and Coach Teefy was very like good with me about like pointing out areas where I needed to improve. And his thing was like, you need to be the guy. You need to like, command the room when we have 50 guys in here, when you have Division I coaches with high expectations. And like you said, like maybe you're not dealing with the coaches as much at the D3 level. It's kind of like out of sight, out of mind for them, especially in the off season when it's voluntary, they're not around. So, how you present yourself, how you command, a group of 50 Division I athletes. It was like, you need to be better at this. And here's how you go about doing that. And, just understanding really everything that goes into, being a D1 coach, had the relationships with the teams, being out at practice. And that's something that I like tell my staff now, like, hey, you need to be tapped into the team as much as possible. Like it can't just be they come see you in the weight room. You need to, go above and beyond and give them that service that the coaches are looking for. And, whether it's just being at practice, whatever it is. And, having time now that I have, 3 teams, assigned to me, it's like, well, I've had 15 teams at the Division III level, and I didn't have, time to get out to practice, but 3 teams is easy to me now. I've had 15, 3 is nothing. I can get out to practice. I can, spend time with them. I have 80 people to worry about and not 250. So, definitely just, I'd say, having that command at the Division I level, like running the room, understanding like the presence you need to have. And it's tough when you're young and you're at I'm 23, I'm coaching, other 22-year-olds. We all played D3. It's a little bit different environment at Salisbury than it was at Temple or other Division I. So like understanding that difference in environment, understanding the competitive nature that the coaches have, and you need to like show them that you're meeting them with that. Like, hey, I take this just as seriously as you do. Like, so I think, those are big steps for me. And I'm appreciative. Like you said, it's important to like, don't sit back and have the poor me's about, oh, I'm not getting opportunities. I'm not, it's like figure out why. And, they might tell you bluntly, but that's what I needed. And I'm very appreciative of like coaches that I've worked under that have helped me with that.
Yeah, those are some good points, like commanding the room and just kind of understanding the differences environment or the different stakes and like there's different pressures that kind of come when you get to the higher level. Not to say like Division 3 or some of the lower divisions don't have like pressure, but like the stakes aren't necessarily there where it's like do or die, win all the time. Like if you make a mistake, it's like publicly known all the time. It's different. It's different in that sense, but man, it's definitely something you need to do. And the unfortunate part with what I think a lot of coaches end up doing like differently than what you and I both did, because I mean you did multiple internships. I did five, like the same thing. Like I was doing some after grad school, I was doing some while I had a full-time job, I was doing some in between my undergrad and in between my grad school just to go out and see what other people were doing to get that Division 1 experience, to see what other coaches had to say and learn. But the problem is, I feel like there's so much information out there, and people just end up consuming it and thinking that they can just apply it versus go in and do an internship, get hands-on experience, do someone else's program, get feedback from that coach, and then start to apply it versus, well, I heard it, I read it, it must
Yeah.
work. It's like the context is different, it's set and setting, the environment is completely different, and no one's actually like kind of evaluating you like you would
Yeah.
at an internship when you're asking for like, hey, I'm coming in here to do your stuff. Tell me what I'm
Yeah.
doing wrong. Tell me what I'm doing right. Like now that you have a staff, how do you kind of bring them onboard them, kind of get them up to speed on what you want the program to look like, you kind of like your non-negotiables for the department so that one, they can work on their strengths, but like at the same time, you have a staff that is developing in-house.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So I think my experience was unique in that I kind of went back and forth from having internships where there's people really pressing me and I'm working on these things. And then I got to do my own thing, be a head strength coach at a small college or be at a private setting. And really like no one's questioning what I do at all. It's really all up to me. So I like to try to give them a mix of that where it's like in an ideal world, I'm not, babysitting you, holding your hand about programming and things like that. But here's the things that I do want to be consistent throughout the program is I want, our core values are, the intensity of the sessions. I want pace in every session. I want high energy. Like that should be consistent throughout any training session. Now your exercise selection or whatever, like, that's up to you. And then, what I tend to do is this year I, had a coach, I'm working with and it's just evaluating, okay, seeing how he does things and just try to like get him to think about what he needs to do better instead of me just being like, here's what you need to do exactly. I'd be like, hey, I'd probably go about doing like this. And it all starts with watch me work, watch how I'm doing this, watch the pace I'm going about with this. Here's why I'm, teaching cleans this way. Here's why I'm doing things this way at all. I have a reason behind everything that I do. And I just want you to, as an assistant or as a GA, coming in to be your own coach, but at the same time, like it has to be done at a high level. I don't care what it looks like. If the pace is really good and you're commanding the room, people aren't standing around, like those kind of things. And if it's, you're doing a really good job, then I don't care what, sets and reps you're putting on your, your squats and your bench. Like that's up to you. That can be your own personal thing, but it's just, I want to help them grow when it comes to that organization. And I think, coming into a new program, like, and it's something I learned from sales is, non-negotiable every day. You need to show up, you need to be sharp, prepared, organized, high energy, have high standards and hold people to those standards. And that's like, what's impressive when they come see you. And I come into this place, it's like the first thing you want to do is make people realize like, oh, like Sam's legit. Like he knows what he's doing. We're confident that he knows what he's doing. He's prepared. The flow of everything was great. He knows why we're doing everything like that. And if, you have young coaches and oftentimes there's doubt. Like you see it as I'm watching their session and they're like teaching something, but they're kind of not sure. So then like the athletes kind of aren't sure. So it's like, no, you need to be confident and whatever it is that you're deciding to do, whatever exercise you want to implement, whatever, be confident in it, be able to demonstrate it, show it with confidence, and, be clear and concise in how you're explaining things. And I think, how you present yourself is huge. And again, I think that's what I got from the private setting. And sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but I think people, and especially in the college setting, they maybe look down on stuff in the private setting because there's lots of people doing nonsense in the private setting for sure. Like they're doing really dumb stuff, but why are people still going to them and gravitating towards them? They have something. They're explaining stuff, they're demoing, they're interactive, they're high energy. Like they bring something to the table that makes people want to train with them. So it's like, why can't we look at that and be like, yeah, this drill is really dumb, but like he's coaching the shit out of this. Like he's demoing, he's doing this. Kids are locked in. Like we want to have that kind of energy and apply it to the good stuff that we learned in school and everything we've learned along the way too. So that's kind of my approach is, you need to match my energy and have high pace, and then everything else kind of fall into line.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I think there's a lot you can kind of unpack there. And the same with the private sector. There's a lot of stuff you could take away from every setting. And I mean, the outcome of what they're doing is what you're looking for. Like maybe the method of how they got to that and like just what tools they're using might not be the same approach that you're going to take, but everything in strength conditioning, everything mostly in life is like proper doses. Like I could go out and take like two ibuprofens and it'll clear a headache. I'll take zero. It won't help the headache. I'll take 40 and I'll take a forever nap.
Right.
So it's about finding the right dose. And with all the stuff you're doing, and like if the private sector like has good elements about the sales and the good elements about like, hey, they're being creative with this exercise. Maybe it's not the exact right execution, or it's kind of unsafe in this manner, or you just don't need that extra instability. Okay, well, let's regress it. Let's do something different. But that energy and like that effort that they're putting into that demo and how engaged those clients are, like that's what we want our athletes to look like. That you could take that away easily. We end up putting a lot of people down, I think, a lot of times rather than kind of taking a step back and just seeing it for what it is, like versus just throw it away completely. But I mean, I think the cool thing you talked about too was like with the younger coaches too, like you don't want them to necessarily just blindly duplicate all the stuff you're doing.
Yeah.
I think when you're a young intern and you're first starting and you're just completely green, that's the only thing you do because you gravitate towards the first person and you think that's kind of everything. And nowadays, coaches are doing that without even hands-on experience. Like they'll just copy triphasic completely, but they've never talked to like Cal. They've never
Yeah.
gone and worked for him. They're reading out of a book, and then they just transplant that program down. Like we used to do that as interns. We would kind of translate the head coach, but in that moment, those coaches were like, "Hey, man, don't coach it like I do. Like, fine, the program is what it is, but don't coach it like me. Coach it like you do. Like, be
Yeah.
your own type of coach. The program is the program. You can tweak that stuff easily, but make sure that the most genuine thing about it is yourself and how you take what's on the paper, take what's on the board, and then disseminate that information and make sure that your athletes can execute that. That's kind of where the magic comes in.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Like I tell everyone that you have to be you. Don't try to be me because it's not going to work. And people can tell when you're not being genuine or you're trying to be somebody else. And especially, I've, been working with football teams and you got 100 guys who like think they're alpha guys and they're looking for weakness anywhere. And if you're like, not being genuine, you're not like they're not going to buy into what you're doing at all. So you have to be you, but that's why I have those like non-negotiable things in terms of be prepared, be organized. Like, you might have a different personality than me, but you've got the session planned out. You're telling everyone like you are prepared, organized, you have command of the room, no doubt. And then how you coach things, whatever your cues are, they can be totally different, but show them that you're a high level professional and they're going to respect that. And then you got to, be you and, figure out what, how your personality can mesh with theirs and how you can get the most out of them for sure. But, like you were saying about, people that do stuff in the private setting is that engagement. Like that's what we want. Like, yeah, they have to come here Division 1 and D3. We had to kind of sell them because off season, they don't have to come. So it's kind of like, how do I get people to come work out? Like D1, they're showing up, but you still want them to enjoy it. You don't want this to be a negative time for them. So, you need to sell yourself on that. You need to make it, figure out how to make it enjoyable for them. And, for lacrosse, they want me to be a hard ass. They want me to be on them about those kind of things. And then I train golf and it's like, isn't this fun, guys? Like, are we having fun? It's more that kind of approach. But my preparation doesn't change and my energy doesn't change. It's just directed differently. So yeah.
No, that's a good way to do it too. Like I found it I found it frustrating like Division 1 sometimes, especially like the teams that are it seems like they're not as invested or like they're letting the record or a performance or something else like carry with them into the weight room. And I've always like, why don't you guys like want to be here? Like, do you not see the tie-in? Do you not like I get it if you don't enjoy the training, but like do you not at least respect it? And it's such a vast difference, like like from Salisbury and like even some other schools that maybe are not prolific, like high level Power 5 schools or whatever it is, or whatever division you want to say. But when you're going into a voluntary session and every kid is like sitting outside the door, like eagerly waiting to like come in, and they're like banging on the door when like their watch says it's 5 o'clock and it's their time to lift. Like, how come some of the places where you're required to be there, that attitude's not there? How come the kids that want to be voluntarily there are coming in droves? It's
Right.
it's such a weird way to like to see that, like once you take that step away from that setting. How do you kind of approach like developing like that culture being in your first year? Like what pieces, like when you first stepped into like this new role like the Troy Mercy, were like, hey, this is what was established last year, like without putting down the staff before it and like still respecting what they were doing. Are there anything I could take from here? Like, what is my philosophy? Can I add to it? Do I need to subtract stuff from what's going on? Like, how do you kind of go about setting like your roots and what you're doing without completely throwing away what was happening before? Because it could that for all you know, that's everybody loved that staff. Everybody loved that guy, or he retired, or whatever it is. Like, how do you kind of now come in with a place that's established and build on it and add your own philosophy to that to keep that culture alive?
Yeah, that's a good question. So luckily, maybe luckily, maybe not, but all the colleges where I've been a director. So the Mary Baldwin, I started the program at Elizabeth City State. I started the program, and then here they essentially after COVID didn't have anyone in my position for almost 2 years. So it was a little bit of a mess. So I could have come in and done anything, and people would have been really appreciative, and that it makes it easy for me, honestly. But I think there were some things I always ask those things when in the interview process is, hey, what do you guys like about what's happening and what do you not like? And knowing that going in and the interview process for me now, and I've been through a lot of them, it's very much me interviewing them and trying to figure out what kind of situation am I walking into. Should I come in and just wipe out and change everything? Are there things that they've done that have worked for them in the past that have value, and try to figure those things out? And there's some traditions and stuff here that I think are really valuable, and we've kept those. And I think, those are things people like. But in terms of the training and the structure of all those things, I think it was clear that those things needed to change. So just having, again, like I said, coming in with that level of preparation, that energy, the clear vision of what I want, the program to look like, what I want a session to look like. And when they're done with their first week, they have confidence that, oh, he's going to lead us in the right direction, just, based on his preparation, his organization, how he leads us through a session. And that's the biggest thing. And then, start, other places I've been haven't been very successful in terms of the wins and losses. So just bringing that expectation and that, desire to compete, because, I want to win. I got to sit on the bench for these games and I have to go out there and, no one wants to be a part of a team that just, doesn't have success. So I'm invested in their success, and I want it, and I bring that energy, and I want them to feel that, and to want it too. And then to enjoy being in here, and that, you get them to enjoy being in here, even though it's going to be hard, it's going to be whatever. But, I think you teach them stuff. You give them stuff that other people aren't doing. Like, there's not a lot of people in this country just doing cleans and snatches. Like, it's not, people aren't doing that. So, when you have, men's lacrosse, they're going to get after it regardless. But all right, I have, women's basketball, and, I'm teaching them cleans. Like, there's value in, hey, I'm teaching you something. I'm excited when you get it. Like, the first time they catch a clean, it looks great, I'm excited for them. Like, and it's one of the rules I have in here is celebrate teammate success. So it's going to be hard in here. Like, I'm going to push them, but we want to celebrate our successes, and get excited for us getting better. Like, that's kind of the environment that I want to create. Is, it's an exciting thing to come in here and get better. And we take pride in doing things that, if you're at, a big college, most people on campus aren't doing anything like this. Like, I tell people to take pride in their work. And if we have a 6 a.m. session, take pride in that. Take pride in, being up early. And I do, I don't like getting up early, but I take pride in having 3 teams done, and admin's not even here in the building yet. I'm done with my day. I take pride in that. And I want people to have that as well. And it's just, you have to have infectious energy and carry yourself in that way if you want people to do it. If they come in here 6 a.m. and you're like, well, guys, I know it sucks to get up early, and here we are, like, they're not going to want to be here either. Like, you have to manufacture that, and manufacture the environment that you want them, that you want.
Yeah, that's a good point. You do definitely have to lead that charge and kind of create it yourself. And a lot of times coaches are going to be the person that kind of starts that off, and you're hoping that the athletes will kind of feed off it, and eventually it'll become more athlete driven, and
Yeah,
then you can just kind of nudge it if it's kind of getting too low or getting too out of hand and high, so you can kind of be the thermostat that keeps it at that even steady state the whole way through.
100%.
How have you kind of dealt with it? Like, if you've had this experience in the past, because I think we talked about it a little bit before, like we started recording, just kind of catching up with coaches. Like, a lot of times, like, frustration kind of comes in line with, we're all competitive. Like you just said, like, we want to be successful. We want to celebrate their success and like create that environment. And like, we don't want to be on a losing team. Like, I mean, but at the end of the day, we're not suiting up to play anymore. Like, we know we're involved more in the process. We're involved in what happens behind the scenes so that we can get them prepared and put them in the best possible position where they can compete and then ultimately be the driver of their success or not. And success doesn't need to be driven on wins and losses, but ultimately, like, no one wants to lose.
Yeah.
So what have you dealt with, like a team or like maybe just an individual athlete where it's just like, this kid really does, this team doesn't care, like they don't want it. Like, how are you going to get yourself up and want it more than them? Like, what is there anything that you've kind of dealt with where it's like, there's no way I can coach a team and be the person that wants it the most when I'm not the one that gets to play? Does that make sense?
Yes, that's definitely happened. Yeah, I've been in that situation before. And, as I'm, kind of maturing through that, I think, ultimately it's, at the end of the day, it's my job, and I need to, maintain and be professional, and try to just, like, you know, people told me before, and I believe this, you can't save them all. Like, if you got a team, maybe there's 1 or 2 guys that are going to listen. There are 1 or 2 girls that are going to, you're going to get through to. And, being in the first year, coming into this program, you want to fix everything right away. You want year 1, everything's perfect. Everything's exactly the way I want it to be. It's the perfect vision. It's done. But it's not realistic. Like, it takes some time. And when you think about how long it takes, when you look at coaches that have been at other schools, Tim Tefee at Temple, how long has he been there? Like, building that thing to have that culture throughout all the teams. How long has Matt been at Salisbury to build that? It's not a 1 year thing. And, you feel good about some of the people that come back from those teams. Some kids that have bad attitudes, or, they don't want it, or it seems to be like that, they go. And then at the Division I level, that tends to sort itself out. If you're not winning, then they're going to bring coaches in that, that, want to win and have those different philosophies and hold them to that standard. But at the end of the day, it's, I can't let it affect me. And I think there's been times where I've let that affect me, where you have a group come in and it's just miserable to work with because they don't, want to be there or whatever. So I try to just, hey, we're going to get good work in. I'm not going to try to change your mind about how you should look at the season or how you work. Like I see that's not really going to change, but we're still going to get good work in. Here's why we're doing these exercises. We have to do these things. My goal, for a team like that is, hey, I'm going to keep you healthy. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we don't compound the misery of this season with everyone being hurt. Like that's really when you're hitting, rock bottom, you're losing and everyone's hurt. Like that's terrible. So hopefully, at least from that perspective, I've worked with teams that weren't successful and you had all the, the culture issues that you had, but it's like, hey, we didn't have a bunch of major injuries. We got through the season. We can take some of the positives and hopefully go into next year and take another step. And I just need to be more patient and not expect things to be perfect after a year.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, just kind of taking the emotion out of it and still coaching them up and getting the work in. You don't want to pile on top of that stuff. It's hard when you've got like a team of 20, 30 that are just like you could kind of smell it and like you could feel it in the air like they've packed it in.
Right.
And you're like, man, how like okay, you're probably not going to take a team necessarily, and then you can motivate, speak them, you can tell them stories, you can do whatever you want. You might get one training session that like turns it around, but you're not going to take a team that's like kind of at that point in time almost already given up and flip them into like a full 180 mindset change of, oh, we got this season. But you can definitely at least get them closer out of that like hole and get the work in and maybe start building a little bit of progress and stack some positive days on it and see if you can salvage as much of the season as possible. And like you said, you're not going to save everybody. It's a tough concept when you're like, man, it feels like the whole team is gone. And
Right.
as soon as you it drifts over to like 51% of the team is done, you're like, damn, this is gonna be a hard one. This,
Right.
this is gonna be hard to kind of keep this ship afloat the whole way. But man,
Yeah.
it's definitely a tough thing. But I know you've kind of dealt with a lot of that stuff and being in year one as a director and then not having kind of anybody in that position, like you mentioned, for the couple years before, there's probably a ton of stuff that you could focus on and do. But with all that information, kind of stepping into a new role, moving and knowing that there's probably a lot of to do things that are going to be added to your plate, like whether you know it, like from the job interview and from the description when they give it to you, or it's going to be a surprise as soon as you walk into that office that first day. So, what did you kind of prioritize in year one? Like, because I know you're coming up on this as we record it, and then what are you kind of looking forward to? Maybe goals wise or pursuing to make improvements on going into year two.
Yeah. So, I think, establishing culture and everyone's going to say that when it comes into year one. And, again, I'll just go back to, from the first week of, hey, session, how every session is going to run and just having consistency with that and showing everyone that, hey, this is the way that we train now. And then, piling on with, you know, working in the private setting, I really loved how we had the time, and granted, we have less time here with the restrictions and everything like that, but we'd have combo sessions where we'd run and then we'd take it right inside and we'd lift. So just like showing, trying to implement that here. A lot of our teams, we do work on the field or on the court, then we roll it down into the weight room. So just changing the structure from what they think, strength conditioning was to them, what they think about, all right, we're just going to go in here and lift and do this, that, and the third, like showing them, hey, this is the way that I think is best, and here's how it's going to benefit you. And then I think that's part of this selling as well is, hey, I understand what you're doing on the field. I'm not just locking myself in the weight room and we're just going to lift and I have no idea what you're doing at practice. Like, no, I see what you're doing. We're going to do drills to help you with how you're going to move. And I know these things. I'm able to communicate them now. So I feel good about that. And just making sure that, they know how to run a set. Like you said, like I should kind of take charge of it at first and then be able to be hands off. And, by the end of year one, there's teams where I'm very much, in that space now where I can kind of take hands off. It is player led. They understand the flow of how everything's going to go, and I insert myself where I need to. That's kind of my biggest goal. And then I think in year two, it's to show them, you want to make improvements to your program, but I think it's also important to show your athletes like, hey, I'm trying to improve too. I'm gonna move stuff around in the weight room. I'm thinking about how things can flow better. I'm gonna grab, a couple little pieces of new equipment and, try to implement them this way and, do some continuing education and try to, learn some things that I can implement and try them over the summer when no one's here and then, use them when they come back. So it's really to, kind of take those next steps. And here we are the nutrition program as well. We don't have an extra person doing that. So that was an area that was really lacking when I got here. So we've got a new space we're going to move that to. And we're investing a little bit more in that and be able to, provide, more protein and stuff for people. And I think it's, things like that, you're meeting them halfway when it's, hey, I'm going to demand a lot of you and expect a lot of you. But at the same time, I'm over here doing extra work to make sure that your sports nutrition program is better because it's, it was non-existent. And now I'm going to do all these things for you as well. So, hey, meet me with really good work in the weight room and I'll make sure I take care of you here. And then, again, with some competitions and those kind of things and, increasing, what we put on social media and trying to involve everyone in that and having more of a total department collective, I think is kind of the goals for next year. I feel pretty good about where training is. And now we have time for everything else. Training is first, like everyone needs to be training really well. And then we can kind of worry about everything else.
Thank you for fucking saying that.
Yeah,
Because people don't, that's one of my biggest frustrations. And it's social media, I think, has made a big shift towards that. It's like perception. It's like, what does everybody think of us? I was like,
yeah,
I don't know. And I don't know if this is old school like thinking, but like I don't care what anybody thinks of me. Like I don't care what's going on. If we're doing stuff the right way, then that'll eventually permeate and that'll get towards people. And then once I feel comfortable with it, and like you talked about inserting yourself at the right moments, those are kind of also the moments where you can kind of insert yourself and then project it out and showcase like what your athletes are doing and what the training looks like. But if you have a bad product at the inner core of what you're doing and like what our main job description is, and like that's in the weight room, the thing that we can control the most, the training, like how the facility looks, like what we do, the product of the athlete that comes in the door and what happens when they leave that room. If that is not the first thing that you're focusing on, I have no idea what you're doing.
yeah,
Because you're not going to fix anything else outside those four weight room walls if what's going on in there is not going well. Fix that first, and it's so much easier to be like, well, this is what I'm doing over here. And they're like, well, you're doing a good job of that. I was like, well, can I make a little more suggestions or can I make some improvements and start opening up that circle a little bit more? It's kind of a crazy world, but that's, I mean, I appreciate you for saying that because like that's the big thing to do, I think, in year one. And now you can start to open that circle up a little bit more and add a little bit else because it's not that you don't have to touch on training and go back, but you laid the foundation and now you can start building on that foundation. But you still have to kind of check and make sure it's structurally sound and it's still doing the things that you want to do and it's still going in the right direction because there's still things that could change from that. It's not a forgive and forget or completely put out of mind. But yeah, it's cool to see like the improvements going into year two. So kind of building
yeah.
on that, you already talked about like some of the department improvements and everything, and then a few things that like personally you're kind of working on. Like what's your kind of training look like? Because you talked about like adding in like some of these movements, the knowledge, skills, and like CUs for yourself. Still staying involved in training, even if you're not competing anymore. Like, how are you making sure that that is kind of an improvement area for yourself, selling it to the athletes and kind of showing that, hey, I'm still practicing what I preach and I'm staying involved as a coach myself.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I want to make sure that, I am doing a lot of the things that I'm going to be prescribing for my athletes. Like, if you believe in it, then you should be doing it. Like if I believe so strongly that you need to do this movement, then I should be, if it's that valuable, I should be doing it myself is kind of the way that I look at it. So yeah, I mean, I continue to try different programs and, do different Olympic lifting programs. And, now it's kind of for me where I get, where I learn things is less from books, and I have all the old school books in the world. And it's kind of good to go back and revisit that sometimes because, with the basics don't change, and it's good to have that foundation. But now with social media, for all, the good and the bad, you find a lot of things that, you see, like you had, Will Rattel on the podcast. He's someone I follow his social media, someone that shares my philosophy pretty close. Like we're going to Olympic lift, we're going to jump, we're going to still do athletic things, but you can incorporate these Olympic lifts. And, everyone that wants to do Olympic lifts, we sharpen our irons for our arguments for why we want to do them. Because, there's some people that say, oh, you don't need them for this or that or whatever it is. But if I believe in them, I got to do them, and I got to do them well. I got to be able to show people how to do them. I got to understand where I struggle with it so I can help people, coach when I see someone else struggling in the same way and I've been through that, I can help them with that. It just makes you, a better coach to do those things. I still get on the field and it's like, hey, if I'm going to teach these drills, when I go show this group of guys, like I can't be tripping over myself. Like they're gonna think, what the hell is this if I can't do it? So, I'm still trying to involve myself in that. But then as I'm getting older, I'm more so, training for longevity, doing a lot of, do yoga at home and I do these online yoga classes, and there's a lot of stuff in there that I'm like, I'm going to steal that move because I think we can incorporate that into the team setting, and it's going to have, these benefits and, working on my flexibility and those kind of things and training through a full range of motion. There's lots of people now, like you're seeing on social media, that have gotten kind of into that wave with, the range of strength and his kind of network and those kind of things. So those are things I incorporate a lot into. And then, those are, areas that I didn't get in college at all. And that's something I can share with them is I don't have a gymnastics background like some of these people on social media. Like they're doing all these crazy splits and they're doing this, that, and the third. It's like I was super immobile, played football, didn't do any mobility training in high school and college. And now I'm able to, get pretty close to the splits and do these mobility things. And it's like anyone can do those things. And it helps me sell that to them as well and sell the longevity of, hey, I'm 32 now and I can still, go play some basketball and, get up and down and run and still Olympic lift. And one day that'll come to an end and I'll do more body weight and calisthenics and stuff like that. But, it's important for me to try those things, especially now, and see, again, you don't want to make the mistake of like, hey, I saw this new thing, I'm going to make everybody do this now. It's like, you better figure out how you're going to work that into your program and still hit the basics that you need. But hey, this new thing that I saw has some value. How can I incorporate this and what's it going to bring? So yeah, very much a mix of things, but you have to practice what you preach, man, or, at least have done it. If you're not currently doing it, it's like, if you competed in Olympic lifting at a high level or something and you don't do it anymore, that's, that makes sense. That's totally fine. But like, if you're asking people to do things and you haven't done them or you don't do them, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I think you hit it right there too. Like you can go back and refer back and say, well, I've done this before or I used to do it. But I think you can only really kind of rely on that stuff if if you're thinking like the 10,000 hour rule or you competed at a super high level.
Right.
Like you're not going to be able to play at that level forever, but because you got to such a high skill level, you are able to kind of retain that information a little bit more because just of the time and effort that you put into it. But if it's something brand new, you need to kind of keep digging away at it. You can't just pick the next shiny thing and put it in. And you also need to kind of make sure that it fits exactly the person, the team, the setting that you're trying to add it into. Like that context is super important because a lot of social media is not giving you that context. They're giving you maybe a rationale. They're giving you like a description of how to execute it, but you're only looking at a quick, like 30-second snapshot. It's not fit into a training session. It doesn't follow like what an NCAA model looks like all the time. Or, I mean, you'll get some of those with some like coaches that are actually presenting like sports clips that are like, hey, this is happening on a low CNS day for a baseball pitcher and stuff like that. But still, even when you look at that stuff, that fits their system. That fits
Yeah.
how they coach. That fits their model, their training schedule, their athletes, that training age, how that coach likes to coach, what equipment they have access to. Like there's so many variables that go into it that you can't just take it at face value. You need to do what you were talking about, like practice that stuff and kind of be a test subject for yourself as a coach.
Yeah. And I think it's okay too. Like I was telling my young coaches this, it's like, yeah, if you're trying to incorporate something, you don't have to be great at it yet. Like you can acknowledge, like if I'm showing someone a move, like a challenging exercise, I can tell them, hey, this is hard. Like this, like I'm not great at this yet. Like, but we're gonna work through this. Like I think that's a totally fair thing to say. Like you don't have to be a master of everything that you need to incorporate. And I'll tell people, hey, I'm gonna show you guys this drill. You're more athletic than me, so you're gonna do this drill better. But here's what it should look like, and at least have some level of competency, in that, whatever it is that you're teaching, just have some level of competency. Can't just say like, all right, do this drill. And then, you have to have something to stand on. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think athletes are so visual too. They want to mimic it. They want to see it be done. And even if it's not perfect, like you're going to get athletes, like if you teach them how to bound, you're going to demonstrate how to do it. And like based off your ability to bound and like, I mean, even your body type and like your skill level, like that is going to be portrayed in their heads completely different. And then when
Right.
they execute it, they're thinking that brain, like mind muscle connection is actually working. They just don't see the snapshot. They don't know how they look. And that's where you can
Right.
kind of make those connections. And then as soon as like that happens as a coach, you're like, all right, well, this athlete does it like I look. So let me use them. Or you find someone that's really good. Okay, here's my demo right here. Be like, all right,
Right.
you guys saw me. I'm not really the most proficient at it. Like my playing days are over. Hey, come over
Yeah.
here. Like Madison's gonna show the bound the real way. And you can kind
Yeah.
of you could play it off a little bit more and then like highlight some athletes and stuff too. Like there's so many subtle ways that you can kind of get more of those visual cues when you're
Yeah.
coaching, but you have as the coach, same as like building respect or starting the first year and being a good demo, you have to be the one that goes on a limb and is confident in front of those athletes first.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. And that's again, that's totally fair to, if I get some GAs coming in next year, they're younger guys, like I'm gonna make them demo for sure. Like, they might do things, they might be better at certain things than me. Like awesome, like use that. But yeah, you can't shy away from and then like if hey, I want to teach this and you realize you suck at it, like cool, like dive into that. Like maybe it's something you can get better at, and I like doing those kind of things and, I'm discovering something. All right, here's something new that I'm bad at. And, kind of, growing up, I played three sports. It was kind of a jack of all trades, master of none type thing. Where like I was solid at everything, kind of like across the board. And I still kind of have that, kind of, philosophy, but I don't like being terrible at anything. Like I'm not going to have anyone out here doing something that I'm terrible at. Like I can't have that. So.
Yeah, so when it comes to that stuff, like I feel the same way, kind of a master of nothing, but like I'm decent at the majority of things. When you're going and looking at kind of making those improvements and like adjusting your own training, like how much is that kind of driven by, hey, this is something valuable that I want to add to my program, but I don't understand it fully. I can't demo it well enough. I don't know if it's something safe to give to my athletes or whatever reason that kind of like drives like I need to work on this more versus, hey, I'm really good at Olympic lifting. I love Olympic lifting. Every athlete should do that. Like, well, how do you find that balance between I'm the best at coaching this and I'm really good at this. I think this is helpful for every athlete. I'm going to just make every athlete do this versus, hey, this is something new. I don't want to add it yet. So where do you kind of meet the middle when you start talking about programming?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have my core things that haven't changed from year to year that I think, hey, every athlete should be doing these things, and here's what I believe in. Um, but all that stuff really came from I tend to maybe it's not the right way to go about it from a younger age, but I'll see something, kind of hate on it. Like I hated kettlebells for no reason, for example. Like I was like, what are we doing kettlebells for? Like when that was like, 8 years ago. And I was like, just do dumbbells. Like what the fuck is a kettlebell? And then like I had someone at this private spot I worked at who's like really good with kettlebells and showed me things that you could do with them. And I was like, oh, like there's a lot of value in this. And got to a point where it's like, okay, like I feel good about my practice with kettlebells, but not everything is, going to fit into a team setting either. It's like, all right, kettlebell arm bar is one of my favorite exercises. It works my shoulder, stability, my mobility. Like I love that movement. But can I teach it to 50 guys? Like, okay, maybe not day one, but again, like, with lacrosse, it's something that we incorporated at the beginning of the spring because I felt good about where our training was, our core things. And it's like, all right, let me try to add a little bit of something here. And, that's kind of my rule is, you know, once we get going, I never want to add a bunch of new stuff at once. It's like, all right, here's our meat and potatoes. Let me try to add something here, something there. And if it works, it works. If not, if I don't like it, it's like, we'll abandon that. Like it's not working for us. Fine. I kind of learned my lesson that way. But yeah, I mean, I always, you know, want to do the basics of what I do to stay strong, to have proficiency in the lifts, but then expose myself to other things and try them and see if I can find, value in them and work on them. And, that's what I like about Olympic lifting, though, is like you're going to see different ways to do them. It's like, all right, we're going to go from different positions. We're going to do different complexes. And here's how this is going to help. And that always, helps me. And then, makes me think, okay, like if I want to eventually, do full cleans, are there complexes I can do to help them out? Like what's the best way to get to the end point that I want? And there's a million different ways to do that, which is why Olympic lifting is so cool. But yeah, man, I just want to kind of dive into everything and see if I can find value in it. See if I can see if it's something that I can get 50 people to do at once. And that's the hardest thing about it. Like we can probably one-on-one coach anything, but it's like, all right, I got 50 people, what am I going to be able to coach well in this setting? That's more the challenge to me.
Right. And I think that kind of goes back to like the same thing you're doing, like in the director role. Like it's not necessarily like the best thing to do year one. Like there needs to be a foundation.
Right.
Like it can be done. I'm sure 50 guys like doing like kettlebell arm bars, you could figure out a way to do it, but that's probably not the first thing you're doing. Is like, one, do you have there's like logistics involved. Do you have 50 kettlebells? Do you have enough floor space
Right.
to get
Yeah,
50
exactly.
6-foot guys on the ground? Like there's only one of me. Like, am I going to really be running over guys to like correct the guy that looks like he's about to like tear his labrum with this?
Yeah.
Like there's so many things that kind of go into it that's slightly different from the private setting, where you might be just working in a small group, or if you're doing more advanced stuff, you're working one-on-one individually and you can kind of dictate what's going on. But when the end of the day, like it's a collegiate setting, it's like everything is derived and getting ready for like the competitive season. Like there's not much time for fluff. So if it's not ready, if an idea isn't good, if it's not going to fit in the team setting, you kind of have to put it on the back burner and be like, maybe this is a next year kind of thing. Like it's just not ironed out yet. And it's hard to kind of test those things in year one, where you don't really know the facility well, you don't know the team well, you don't know the dynamic, the flow of, like I've talked about this a bunch, like the flow of like the room and like getting from one side to another to make like a training session, like you talked about, the pace of it be up tempo and like everybody like be involved. It's a lot more that kind of goes into it if you really want to shape and control how the environment is, versus like, all right, well, the bar's here, the kettlebells are on the other side. I want them to go from RDL to like kettlebell press. Like, okay. But like there's more logistics to that, and there's more that's
Yeah.
kind of involved if you want it to just be, hey, we lifted today, versus like, hey, we trained, like the team trained and got after it today. There's a big difference, I think, when it comes to that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, so now kind of like being in that position again, like kind of not to harp on so much like everything that's going around with like the work ethic and like the training environment, but it's cool to be at at kind of a tight knit place. And I know you're bringing new staff and stuff on too, but it's like 15 sports, like kind of one team mentality, and you get to kind of shape it in a way. But being at kind of like a smaller school, like have you found like any kind of creative ways to kind of spin it and like get those teams more involved with each other, or make sure that the room flows differently? Like what are some things that like on a smaller staff at maybe a smaller Division I school that bigger schools, like bigger Power Five schools, can maybe take away and learn from you that you guys are kind of working on?
Yeah, I think something big for us is space. Like we have good space. Like I'm able to get 50 guys in here to train at once. But we also, with our sports and schedule, we have one turf field everyone's battling for. So it's like, okay, how are we gonna schedule, some teams out here practicing, so I can't do the speed and lift how I want to do. So I have to, modify this. Or we have one gym, so just having like, space things. And I think I've learned from being at small schools and being at private facilities where I'd go coach at high schools even, and you're basically in a closet, is that I feel comfortable, going into any setting, anywhere, and being confident that I can run a good session. I don't need any piece of equipment. I can find, with the basics just from body weight, or hey, we got barbells. Hey, we got barbells and dumbbells. We have everything, whatever it is, like confidence that I can run a session anywhere. And sometimes that happens at the D1 level. Like a coach is like, hey, can you come out to practice and do something? And you're like, I'm totally comfortable doing that. But, if you're not comfortable, all right, I got 8 med balls and some bands. Like, you need to know what that kind of session looks like. And, especially, when you're trying to get buy-in from coaches, and there's always going to be sports that maybe in season or whatever, they don't see, they don't want to take the time to train. They don't want to come into the weight room or whatever. And that's something I actually did at Salisbury was, hey, with women's lacrosse, I'm going to show the initiative to like, hey, I'll come out to the field and run a session out there. And then it gets them training. And then like slowly but surely, like, okay, next year they're in their 1 year, they're in their 1 day a week, like you just, reach out to them and you're trying to get them involved, and you're just trying to be as creative as possible to get training in, because you're just, you're trying to figure that out. It's not like, you're working with a basketball team and they have their own weight room and their own gym and you can just schedule it however you want. Like you got to make things work and feel comfortable running a session at any time with whatever equipment that you have. And I think there's a lot of value that comes from that, coming from a small school, and then just being creative in your exercise, selection. I still do some exercise. We did it Salisbury, we didn't have, we just had, regular racks and stuff. We didn't have any lat pull downs. And I remember we had like prowler poles, and we had like thick bands, and we'd hook them up and use like the prowler poles, like a lat pull down. I still use that exercise here. We don't have lat pull downs. We have pull up bars and thick bands, and cool. It's a, great way to add another exercise in here, which was born out of necessity. Like we didn't have machines, so we had to invent things. So I think, the ingenuity that comes from being at a small school or a small place, it's like, we're going to find a way to do certain exercises, and we're going to, invent new variations just based on necessity. We don't always have the perfect setup and perfect flow of like, I can, write this program exactly how it's in the book and it's going to work fine. So I think just having ingenuity and being creative and being a problem solver, and when things come up, it doesn't rattle me or doesn't rattle, those kind of coaches, because it's like, cool, I've done this with no equipment and, been fine. So, and then that helps the kids too. It helps the athletes. Like they, if you're rattled and you don't know what to do in a situation, and then you can preach that to them. It's like, doesn't matter the situation. We're going to get good work in any time. Nothing bothers us. And you can, that can kind of creep into the values that you want to instill in them too.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of touches on all the stuff we talked about, like all like young coaches coming into a position, whether an internship, a graduate assistant, or being at a smaller school. Like a lot of stuff is born out of necessity. You find workarounds. You got to get super creative. You can kind of beg, borrow, and steal as much as you want, and liberate things from different places to kind of put something together to get the best outcome for your athletes. But though those are some helpful things to have, like that ingenuity, the creativeness, like kind of the poise to be thrown into the wolves and come do something sporadically out at the field, or be equipment be taken away, or like rain delays, and like, oh, instead of having half the team, you're gonna have the full team because we have to move practice
Yeah.
back. Like stuff like that, I think you deal with a lot more like when you have multiple teams, or you're sparse for equipment or space and time, and you have a lot more going on. So when you could experience those things sooner than later, when it comes to a more higher pressure situation, or you're at a bigger school where the pressure is on and like it's do or die a little bit more, and people are breathing down your neck, you're like, I got this. I've done this before. Oh, we used to do this here. Like it instills a lot more confidence in yourself. And I think that's the same way like we treat it with younger coaches, like in a director role, in a leadership role, like give them kind of controlled opportunities where they can fail, and then just like short, like quick hot wash after. It was like, hey, what went well, what didn't go well? Like you gotta, this is what you gotta work on moving forward so that they don't make those mistakes again. And then they're more comfortable when that same situation or similar one arises.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another big part of it too is, your relationship with admin, your relationship with coaches is, you know, I'm pretty sure most coaches, even at the D1 level, like they want a bigger budget. They want more. Like you were probably having a conversation with admin and you're going to ask for things, right? But I think it's important to show them what you can do with what you have first. Like, okay, I want more for my budget, but here's what I did with what you gave me. You didn't give me much, but here's how I stretched this budget. Here's how I made things work. Here's how I, found equipment for cheaper, or I, sold some equipment we didn't need. I'm, finding creative ways to do it. So then it gives you more ability to ask for more. It's like, hey, look what I did with this. Imagine what would happen if you gave me just a little bit more, what I could do with that. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it too when you're trying to make improvements in the program. Again, coming from a school where you had no budget and we're cutting foam, rollers out of PVC pipe with a circular saw, and it's just like, I'm willing to do that. And then if it's like, imagine if you gave me a little bit of money, what we could do.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I've been doing that at every school, even Division 1 level.
Right.
Just in the back with the table saw, whatever you got.
Yep.
I mean, burning rope and sticking glue. Like that's where those ropes from Salisbury came. That came off an old naval ship. Had to get some of the oil off of them, cut it in half, and then all the frayed tips at the end, blowtorch it and dip them in plexi glue.
Right.
Hey, those are the best ropes I've ever used. So
Saying
it's,
that's what I'm
it
saying.
it's got to have some of that stuff too. And I think those like on top of like having some fun stories to kind of go back and tell people like all the things that you went through and understand it, like those are all, like each one of those stories is something that you can kind of use moving forward in your current situation, whether to be improve something, kind of relate back to something you've already done before, or share with some of the interns like, hey, I went through this so you don't have to go through this, in a sense. So
Yeah.
no, definitely awesome information. So hey, when it comes to information too, like you dropped like Will Rattel, like who's been on the show, and like some other like colleagues and stuff that we've shared, like between Tiffy and like Matt Nine and everything. Where are you kind of going for like additional resources? Are there any other coaches like that maybe we should kind of look into or follow along, whether it be like strength conditioning, leadership wise, or maybe even like hobby related for yourself that you feel like are kind of vital to like your continuing education?
Yeah. I definitely, picking a lot, through social media when it comes to that, like, the movement stuff and those kind of things. And, I even seeing, Chris Messina get into some of that stuff now, just watching, what he's doing on social media, and he's kind of taking that turn as well. And all that stuff gets connected, and that's awesome. Actually a friend of mine who interned under me, he's actually the head strength coach at Hood College, a Division 3 in Maryland now. He's into, he does boxing and stuff as well. So he has that kind of perspective, and I'm, picking his brain on how he incorporates that. And, they have a unique perspective when it comes to conditioning for fighters and stuff like that. So, I talk to him when it comes to that, and he, has similar interests when it comes to me. But yeah, I mean, just a lot of the coaches that I knew, that I know, that I've, come up with, that, you know, and we really kind of had our own, things that have influenced us, and then we're doing different things, and just watching how, people evolve, and just, I think that's the biggest thing, is my, immediate network, and trying to, see, hey, what are you reading? Like, what are you looking at, and stuff like that. And, really, for me, and, I'm reading this book right now, Peak, actually, and this like took me down a rabbit hole. Like, what I do with books now, it takes me a longer to get through them, because there's so much information in there. Like, he's talking about sleep, and he's talking about gut health, and there's just, that's so over my head. So it's like, okay, let me dive into this information a little bit. So this year we started doing, putting out information on our social media about, sleep, about nutrition. And, they're not going to read a packet that I give them. I feel like, that is past, but they're going to look at their phone and see Instagram. And if it's me kind of in their face all the time with like, here's what you should be eating, here's how much sleep you should be getting, here's what happens when you don't get this much sleep, those kind of things. So, I tend to, read some of those things, and try to understand it well enough to communicate that back to the athletes, like if it has value, for sure. For those things that are kind of outside of, how we're lifting, how we're moving, but those things that are so big, where it's really about education, and I have no control, which is, the craziest part about that. And it's just like, you just hope for the best, but you just hope that you can get through to them. And it helps my own training as well, when you're reading some of this stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, it definitely ties right back into like your own training. Like training kind of ties into your coaching kind of ties back into your training. And it's kind of the cool thing when you're still tapped into it and you're still improving yourself as a coach. Like inevitably that stuff like funnels right back to your athletes. And that's kind of where my best ideas always derive from. That's why like training's so hard for me sometimes to like keep myself on track, because it's like the one opportunity like where like ideas just end up like flowing. And it sometimes it sucks because that's like the one time I just want to shut everything off and like focus on myself. But I'm like, oh well, I can do this with the athletes. And then I kind of go on a tangent, and then I get stuck on that and be like, oh, I got to get back to training. But
Yeah.
it's a loop. It's a loop, but it's super helpful. And I mean, it's just kind of the same as like going to the conference or like doing this show as well too. Like as much as we try to get away from talking just like X's and O's and everything, like we're passionate about coaching and training, that even if we like talk hobbies or anything like that, it inevitably kind of gets back to that, or we find a way for it to be taken into that context. So that's cool. It's cool what you do though with the social media and everything, because I think you got a pretty good foothold on with it, because the information you're already learning, like it's digestible to a book, but your athletes are going to use it. So if you can make it even more bite-sized information, tie it back into them, and the best part is it's coming from who they view as a reliable source. I mean,
Right.
even if they think Liver King is a more reliable source, like that's not for us to argue. Um, but if it's coming from their strength coach who they already believe in and they already work with all the time, and it's information and it's easy to kind of like quick some pointers or like a reference if they want to learn more, like that's going to click with them, I think, more so than, hey, read this article, hey, watch this video. It was like, I did that for you because it benefits me, but it also benefits you. But if you want more information, look into this.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And, I'm just taking, I started doing something at the end of the year too that I want to do more next year, of like, we have, some TVs in here. So I had some interns put some stuff into a PowerPoint, and just like quick points where it was like, hey, at the end of the session, hey, let's look up at this, and just a factoid of like, hey, if people that sleep 6 hours compared to 8 are 4 times more likely to get injured, things like that. It's just like, that's a simple fact that I can give you, and there's a citation, and you're not going to read this book, but I read it, and here's the information that I got from it, and here's like how it directly affects you. So I think that kind of always drives me. And then like part of what guides what I look into is also athletes ask me questions. They'll come up to me and be like, "Hey, coach, like I'm vegetarian or something. What are some things?" And I'm like, "I don't know anything about that." So maybe I should figure that out, or they ask me about whatever it may be. And, you're always going to have different, circumstances come up. So I think that kind of drives me to, again, I don't want to be someone that's bad at anything on the floor, and I don't want to be someone that doesn't know anything about something, when someone asks me about it. So I think that kind of drives me too.
Yeah, that I mean that feeds into kind of that curiosity as well, but you're not going to be able to know everything. So it's like for coaches that kind of get that stuff brought up and be like, you know what? I don't know enough to kind of like weigh on this right now. Like, let me go look. And then
Yeah.
it benefits both of you. Like, hey, I actually learned this is pretty interesting. Like, let me share this with you. When you follow back up with them on that stuff, like that's an athlete that's probably going to be like pretty happy that the one that got the information, but like that you actually like did the work to follow up with them and bring them to light on that stuff.
Yeah, that definitely goes a long way.
Definitely. Hey, so Sam, like any good training session, we end the show with the finisher. So I got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and maybe overtime at the end. So you ready?
Let's do it.
All right, first one I got for you. Biggest influence in the strength and conditioning profession.
In the profession, I'm just gonna say Joe Ken because I base a lot of like just my training structure around him. The owner of a private spot I worked at played football at Arizona State, and Joe Ken was a strength coach. And it's just funny how like that kind of stuff has stood the test of time. And my like initial like training structure, which is the most important thing, is very like kind of based from that, and I branched off from there.
Oh, nice. There we go. What can you be found doing when you're not coaching, you're not training, like you're outside the weight room walls, when it's not related to strength conditioning? Like, how do you kind of recharge? What kind of hobbies you got going on?
Uh, big into, I go hiking with my dogs. I like being outside. Um, that's one thing I struggle with here in Detroit is I got to drive kind of far to get into any hiking like that. But when I live in Alabama, I could walk from my house into a spot to go hiking. So that's what I really like to do. But now that I'm here in the city, get out to concerts and stuff. I love doing stuff like that. My fiance is all into that, so I like to get away and do that type of stuff.
Okay. Hey, so if you weren't coaching, what do you think you would be doing as a profession? And if you could go pro in one sport, what would that sport be?
Ooh, okay. I'd say probably pursuing law. Like that was something that I thought about doing was being a lawyer. My sister does that actually. And I think I love arguing about anything. I'm one of those type of guys that's like, I'll argue with you about anything. Like that's, how I am. So I think that, that'd be a good move for me. And, you know, I'm gonna say football. I've played all these sports and you realize like all those sports have a very different culture. And at the end of the day, I'm a football player. I get along with people that have that kind of mindset. I love basketball, but man, like that mindset is totally different. And baseball is a different culture as well. So I think, regardless of more money in basketball and baseball, I think football is where I'm at.
All right. Hey, so setting up an ideal training day for yourself, whether it's hopefully soon to be in your home gym, but for right now, like, hey, you got the whole Detroit Mercy weight room to yourself. Like, what music is playing and blasting through the speakers? And then when it's all said and done, like, what's the best post-training meal?
Oh, okay, that's good. Um, Man, probably just some like ridiculous like Young Dolph or Key Glock or something that just like bangs with like, ridiculous bass or something like that. Like, yeah, something really stupid like that. Um, and then, oh, meal. That's a good one. Um, Probably like hot pot. I've been doing that with my fiance a lot. So it's like you boil the broth or whatever, and you just throw different meat and vegetables and stuff in there. We've been doing that a lot. So yeah, that's probably the banger for me. Yeah.
Interesting. That is a combo right there for sure.
Insane combo. Sure, yeah.
Hey, so last one I got for you for overtime. What is your favorite part of coaching? And then what is your favorite part of training or competing?
I'd say like watching the light bulb go off for someone, like watching someone get something that they didn't think that they could do, or they were struggling with, and they get it. That's a great feeling, and getting excited for them, and that, I think that's a big part of why we all do this is, we like seeing, people overcome those type of things. So I think that's big. And then what was the second part? Oh,
Favorite part of training or competing?
I think again, yeah, it's doing something that I didn't think that I could do, and doing something new, and or I'm pursuing a certain movement, mobility wise, something that I'm focusing on right now, and then like, holy shit, I did that. Like, it took me a year to work through this whole thing. Just like the gratification that you get from that, man, is that's why you keep doing it. Or you hit a PR, like nothing better, you know.
No, it's cool. It's the same. It's almost like identical answers. It's that payoff after all the work comes in, and you don't really know how soon it's going to be, how long it's going to take, but like that feeling of actually accomplishing it and it's starting to click, like it's a pretty cool thing, and it's awesome to watch it like with athletes, because we know how it felt like when it came for us, or if we're trying something new and then it comes to us. But when it's something that like maybe they're not necessarily as passionate about being in the weight room as we are, and like we know it's coming, we're just expecting it almost. When it clicks for them, it's like, oh, it's a pretty powerful thing. And you kind of, at that point, you almost like hook, line, sinker, you got them.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then that's part of why I love, that's my thing, is I want to be excited for them, and I want them to like, because if someone's hyping you up, you get more excited about it. Then it's like, oh, like this is cool, and then you start to enjoy it more. And then once I think that's how we all started when we started training, was like once we got a little taste of getting better, and that's like then we're hooked, and I want them to have that same type of thing. And ultimately, I want athletes that leave here, they graduate, I want them to feel good about training in the future, whatever they decide to do with it. Like, I want them to walk into any gym and feel like, hey, I know what I'm doing. I feel confident in how I'm moving, and I got a good foundation from my college experience. And that's, part of the goals of what I want to do here too.
Yeah, that's a great message for all your athletes. And I mean, I completely agree and echo that. It's what you want all your athletes to be able to do. Like this, it's kind of a training as a conduit for life, and you're not going to be able to like be playing your sport forever. So you want to make sure that there's a lot of more benefits that go outside of just being stronger or faster or bigger that you can take away from it. And hopefully they're enjoy that healthy side of fitness and performance like forever, and can pass it down. So hey, it's a great message. So hey, for anybody that's got more questions for you, want to follow along for what you guys got going on, or see what Detroit Mercy and the rest of your strength staff has kind of lined up for year two, where can they get a hold of you, Sam?
Yeah, so my Instagram, JEFK92, you can just probably look me up, Sam Jeffries. And then our, strength conditioning one, Detroit Strength One on Instagram. So we'll be posting a lot more this coming year in terms of, our training and stuff, now that we're in year two. And we should have some more personnel to help us out with that. And we want to kind of, document some training and some things that we're trying out, and hopefully, be a good resource for others too.
Awesome, man. Well, we'll link everything, and we appreciate you coming on today, man. And I know it'll be a great second year, almost coming up on the full anniversary of year one. So appreciate your time, man. And it was definitely good to catch up today.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you having me on.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.